Right. So hi all. Yeah, I'm Josh Gittins. I work for Arup as part of the Delivery Resources Network, sitting in Bristol, and I've got a background in kind of nature-based solutions in the water environment, predominantly. But I worked with lots of local authorities, government regulators, etc., on a lot of these kinds of issues around nutrient neutrality or biodiversity net gain, nature-based solutions, all that good stuff. So yeah, I'm going to take you through a bit of an introduction today, and then Alex McCauley is going to talk to you about some case studies, and then we'll do a bit of a Q&A towards the end. Alex, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, I'm Alex Nicholson. I'm a specialist in nature-based solutions, primarily from a flood risk perspective. So that's what one of my case studies is going to be around. And but yeah, as Josh said, just have a much larger and growing interest in how nature-based solutions can help on a kind of raft of ecosystem services, from carbon sequestration to biodiversity net gain and all that. So I'll pass on to Josh again.
Right. Cheers, Alex. Okay, so yeah, brief agenda. As I mentioned, I'm going to give some context to the sort of socioeconomic and environmental challenges that we face, and then talk around how nature-based solutions can kind of begin to address those, how they compare to kind of our traditional approaches, some of the sort of multiple benefits we can gain from them. And then, as I mentioned, Alex will talk through some case studies, bit of a discussion around nature-based solutions, and then we'll have a Q&A afterwards. So let's get going then. So I wanted to just set some context first around sort of the socioeconomic and environmental challenges that we're kind of facing, that I'm sure everybody is aware of. On my first slide here is just kind of mentioning well, on the left-hand side, we've got the classic 3 pillars of sustainability. This is traditionally how people have thought about sustainability, ensuring that there's a kind of equal thought given to social, environmental, and economic aspects of a project, for example. But kind of as time has gone on, and yeah, as more thinking and research into the area of sustainability has been kind of undertaken, we're beginning to understand things a little more in a kind of nested or an embedded view, where the economy is kind of sitting within society, and that is kind of underpinned ultimately by our environment. So one of the key things here to get across is that the environment kind of provides us with all of our kind of raw materials and anything we require to actually develop and support society, provide services, deliver placemaking, etc. So it's a key thing that we're going to try and talk through about how nature-based solutions can sort of help us to develop and improve our practices as we go along for better sustainability, let's say. I just wanted to talk a little bit about donut economics as a kind of viewpoint or an emerging kind of concept in this space, where I think Kate Raworth, the author of Donut Economics, back in the sort of the mid 2010s, came up with the concept and has been kind of pushing it since, discussing the concept I kind of talked around there, around the fact that we have sort of environmental or ecological ceilings and boundaries on what we can kind of do in society without causing harm ultimately to ourselves. And then there's also sort of a baseline social threshold also to deliver those services that we all need to survive and thrive. So I just want to reference that as a kind of interesting point that is relevant here and set a bit of the context. So some of the challenges specifically, I mean, I think probably most of us would be aware of the challenges around us these days, but yeah, specifically in our urban areas, there's a lot of sort of socioeconomic and environmental pressures on these systems. So yeah, there's delivery of housing stock, social mobility, issues around equity, linked very, very closely and sort of compounded by sort of biodiversity loss issues, fragmentation, flood risk, water quality, and then sort of climate change as the big overarching driver there of many of the issues exacerbating one another, which makes it difficult for us, for our leaders, for decision makers, for policy makers, for all you delivering projects on the ground, and all of us living in sort of urban environments, very challenging, and it's kind of brought a focus onto how can we, regenerate our existing urban areas. What can we do with our existing spaces for that, for better placemaking and to deliver multiple benefits to address some of these challenges. So yeah, today we're going to kind of mull over the question of, can nature-based solutions provide us with the tools for improved sustainable development? And this is kind of the angle we're going to look at today. And yeah, we'll discuss through in more detail if you have questions later on, as Amanda said. So let's get going. Nature-based solutions. I'm going to provide a little overview, and then Alex will talk through some specific case studies. So what are nature-based solutions? So I might get this wrong, but I'll give it a go. The International Union of Conservation of Nature, I think, defines nature-based solutions as you can see here on the screen. I mean, ultimately, it's any form of intervention, that we can try and reinstate features of a natural ecosystem to support and deliver the services and goods that we need as a society, and it's really benefiting from from the hard work that nature has done over many thousands of years of evolution to kind of deliver these services and help us, and we can take inspiration from the way nature designs itself to address challenges and sort of provide us with services. So some of the hallmarks really are that a nature-based solution addresses one or more societal challenges. As I mentioned, it kind of it uses ecosystem function to address challenges, and then also it's delivering simultaneous benefits to people and biodiversity, and alongside simultaneous benefits, delivering multiple benefits. We want to be delivering and implementing solutions that are not designed for one specific reason, but can provide multiple co-benefits to people and nature. So the types of nature-based solutions. So yeah, this is something called the grey to green continuum here, and it's just a way of conceptualizing the different types of nature-based solutions into sort of neat boxes. It's a bit messier than this in reality, but we've got on the left-hand side here natural ecosystems. So anything we would consider natural or near natural as an ecosystem. For example, here you've got peatland. This is quite degraded in what we can see in this picture here, but a natural functioning peatland environment or naturally functioning river environment or coastland, salt marsh or something would provide a lot of features that enable that habitat to be sort of sustainable in the longer term. And now we have all the way up to the right-hand side of the diagram where we've got more traditional engineered based approaches. We might build flood defenses, typically as hard defenses or anything like that. We might concrete or make a lot of surfaces impermeable in the urban environment, which causes some challenges for us to deal with. So anywhere in between those 2 points, we have kind of a spectrum of nature-based solutions which can sit. So we've got on bottom left here sort of restoration of floodplain. This allows a lot more water to be stored in areas upstream of urban environments, which Alex will talk about in a bit more detail. But yeah, it provides a lot of multiple benefits by trying to get a habitat back to as natural as possible. And then we've got a sort of increasing hybrid approach with sustainable urban drainage systems. You can see here sort of in the middle and the top, floating reed beds, runoff attenuation features. All these are kind of mimicking kind of services or features that a natural ecosystem might provide in a healthy state. And then we have more sort of grey-green features that try to bring back some green space and bring back some of the kind of hyper-local benefits of nature-based solutions in the urban environment. So we've got pocket parks here, which are a neat little example of creating some spaces for people to enjoy, and then also kind of retrofitting elements of existing urban infrastructure, such as green walls, as you can see at the bottom right there. So how do nature-based solutions stack up? So as I mentioned, there's sort of a traditional view on engineering and our approaches to delivering sort of urban services and goods. I've split them out into a few categories here to provide you a bit of a comparison between how we would normally do it and some approaches. And Alex will talk a little bit later about some challenges to delivery of nature-based solutions. But yeah, I thought I'd just quickly go through a bit of a comparison of what the benefits are, some of the reliability elements of it, some costs, and some resilience aspects to think about. So traditionally, from a benefits perspective, regulators or anybody sort of regulating the environment or regulating a service that we deliver to society, people like tried and tested, people like certainty. This is traditionally, what has led us down that hard engineering route is very specifically engineered solutions that do what they say on the tin as such. However, with that sort of narrow approach to design, there is a challenge because you kind of need to design multiple facets in then, which is quite difficult to do. So there's using nature-based solutions as an approach actually supports a wider gamut of sort of benefits and benefits which accumulate over time rather than are delivered sort of immediately and then require a lot of maintenance in the long term. The challenge that comes with that is that natural ecosystems are quite complicated. So monitoring and being able to demonstrate the benefit of these services to regulators is a real challenge. Again, we'll talk about that a little later, or we can talk about it in some more detail. But yeah, measuring the benefits or quantifying the benefits of nature-based solutions can be challenging and make developing a business case for them a little tricky. So reliability, as I mentioned, yeah, people like tried and tested approaches, and yeah, with a sort of traditionally engineered approach, they deliver to do one thing predominantly, whilst nature-based solutions seek to achieve multiple benefits. Yeah, kind of direct. There's benefits you can kind of immediately notice, and then heaps of sort of wider indirect benefits, which again make the issue of reliability kind of come to the forefront of people's minds. Like, how can I see this working? How do I know this is delivering the value that you're telling me it should? And that really requires kind of gathering a sort of complex multidisciplinary team to be able to support demonstrating those multiple benefits. Costs. This is obviously something very important to consider. With traditional engineering approaches, there's typically a large upfront capital cost, and then obviously operation and maintenance in the long term. Whilst most nature-based solutions have a far smaller per intervention upfront capital cost. And then I suppose the investment profile is more in line with benefits accumulating. So of course there's also maintenance and operation costs, but as the costs increase sort of gradually, also so do the benefits. So there's a really important long-term view to take on building a business case for nature-based solutions. And yeah, it's difficult to make a business case for them in the immediate or short term. But yeah, I think case studies Alex will talk through will also touch on the fact that delivering small but many is also a kind of a view one needs to take on this. So thinking a bit strategically about delivering smaller and many interventions rather than one large intervention via a traditional approach. It's also something to consider. And the last category there, just sort of resilience and adaptive capacity. So it's a bit of a bunch of buzzwords really that might not mean a lot to people, but the idea here is that as we are facing kind of significant challenges around climate change, flood risk, water pollution, lots of things in the news and on people's minds these days, and and if we're in a space where we're designing engineered approaches to solve challenges for them now, it's very difficult to predict what the future is going to hold for us, and how we might need to tweak tweak solutions to provide us with future services or to be resilient to future climates. And in this sense, nature-based solutions can be a bit of a better approach, as they require specialist maintenance and delivery initially, but also they're far easier to tweak, I suppose, and you can adaptively manage those environments or those solutions to kind of deliver, for the there and now, rather than far easier than you can, I suppose, with a big intervention. You've invested a lot of time and money in that's designed for one sort of static future. Why now? I mean, I think I've given a lot of the context as to why nature-based solutions are something we need to start thinking about now. But this diagram here on the left-hand side, you can see a lot of the benefits and disbenefits that can come as associated with nature-based solutions. And although they may be very local, I think in the delivery of these kind of benefits, you might see a very localized sort of a quality improvement or localized temperature regulation or something like that. That is not to say that the delivery of them at scale, can't start to really turn the tide of habitat degradation, fragmentation, biodiversity in our urban environments, and then ultimately sort of the indirect benefits I've mentioned that benefit people around sort of their physical and mental well-being. And on the right-hand side here, there's this Bosco Verticale in Milan is a large kind of residential building, or I think they call it a vertical forest. Is something that's often touted as a good example of nature-based solutions. I mean, it kind of does sit on the grey element, a bit grey element of the spectrum of nature-based solutions, but they've attempted here to embed vegetation into a building to provide some services that they would typically have to design in otherwise, and in a way it's become a bit of a tourist attraction. A lot of people pay to visit this feature, and creating spaces and kind of iconic structures like this can begin to inspire others in others to try and do something similar, or to at least question, why have they done that? It's kind of what's the goal here? Trying to achieve multiple benefits is a difficult thing to be able to convey. I think it's a bit abstract and a bit conceptual, unless you have something which you can kind of demonstrate this through. And although this might not be the best example you'll see of nature-based solutions, this is definitely a turning point, I think, which we can start to point to and begin to justify some of the need for some of this work. And also, I suppose in recent years there's been a lot of legislative now and policy drivers, especially through the kind of English planning system. So, and I think nature-based solutions broadly, by the nature of them being able to deliver multiple benefits, can address sort of multiple challenges associated with these drivers. So, the most recent kind of driver here, we've got mandatory biodiversity net gain come in through the Environment Act. So delivering that net gain, whether it be 10% or 20%, whatever the kind of local authority requirement be, delivering that benefit through a nature-based solution can provide potentially also offset from a nutrient neutrality perspective if planned in a kind of appropriate manner. And also you're gonna receive kind of benefits from a net zero or carbon sequestration perspective. So I think nature-based solutions, or using nature-based solutions as an approach to deal with biodiversity loss and climate risks, you can hit some of these multiple legislative drivers to deliver benefits to people. And also there's kind of you can see on the right hand side here some documents there. The nutrient neutrality principle is the statutory sort of BNG metric. Using these tools and these principles and the guidance from from DEFRA and Natural England is a start to begin to think about how bringing in we can use nature-based solutions to generate sort of credits and begin to drive sort of environmental markets and investment through green finance and bits of blended finance to support delivery of nature-based solutions in more constrained areas, such as sort of urban towns and cities, relative to sort of wider peri-urban or rural areas, which is kind of, there's more land, I suppose, for this offsetting to take place. But yeah, just a few thoughts there on some of the legislative and policy drivers going forward. And I think now I'm gonna hand over to Alex, talk us through some case studies, and yeah, then we'll have a discussion afterwards. Cheers, Alex.
Nice one, thanks, Josh. Yeah, I'll if you wouldn't mind putting on
Yep.
one slide. So yeah, the first case study I'm going to talk about is around natural flood management, and Josh and I had a bit of a discussion about whether to include this, but because of a focus on more urban areas. But this example is upstream of a urban area in Stockton-on-Tees in the northeast, and I sort of wanted to talk about this for that reason. Another legislative set of acts regarding flood risk surrounds natural flood management really across England, Scotland and Wales. It's now a mandatory exercise to consider the benefits that natural flood management could bring to a more traditional scheme, regardless of the scale really. Starting with Scotland, I think, who were the first to get it into legislation, and then followed by England and Wales. This example, so natural flood management, is all about integrating interventions into a river catchment or a landscape that have the potential to store water temporarily on the surface of the land, like this image. This is a reconnected floodplain system in a woodland called Cotham Woods, upstream of Stockton-on-Tees. So yeah, physically storing water, or it could be about roughening the landscape and changing land cover by planting trees, by better agricultural management. It could be about using interventions you might have heard of, like leaky dams or large woody debris in watercourses to slow the kind of the speed of water as it's moving through river systems. And I suppose from an urban context, the idea of having something called debris in our river systems is not something we'd be delighted with, particularly with the added risk that could kind of bring up in terms of blocking culverts and other things. So it's not something that is traditionally associated with urban areas. I suppose sustainable drainage systems and green infrastructure would be more along this sort of line. But the reason I wanted to talk about this, situated a few kilometres upstream of Stockton, is a Forestry Commission owned woodland called Cotham Wood, and throughout that woodland, where I think about 30% of the river catchment in total drains all the way down to Stockton, comes through this wood first, and there's about a 1.5 kilometre stretch of the river that goes through the woodland, and there was a disconnected floodplain within it. And essentially the Environment Agency and Forest England and Stockton Borough Council all began talking about this site and about the potential that this could offer. Meanwhile, downstream and kind of preceding the development of this as a project, was a traditional scheme being being installed, a scheme of walls, embankments, and other infrastructure downstream to protect parts of Stockton to a 1 in 75 year standard of protection. But the very upstream part of Stockton, called Oxbridge, was left only at a 1 in 25 year standard of protection. So the idea of this upstream storage was to try and take a proportion of that flow that's coming through this woodland, store it temporarily to slow it down and to help raise the standard of protection further downstream. So it's really talking about how we can integrate natural solutions or natural-ish solutions into mitigating flood risk further downstream. And the next slide, I've tried to kind of capture that in a very poorly drawn sketch in PowerPoint. On the left is the woodland, and that's actually got the it's some recent imagery that's got the features embedded into the imagery. And on the right hand side, there's a map. On the bottom left of that map is the woodland. You can kind of see with the river flowing through the middle of it. Thanks, Josh. And then a few kilometers downstream it goes. There's the A66, I think, and then there's Stockton. So yeah, this is far upstream. If you click once, Josh, that's showing these kind of this dashed line where these inlet features were made into this floodplain. All these areas had to be excavated and material put on around the outside to form kind of informal embankments. Inflow and outflow structures were put in place. And if you click one more, Josh, and then the idea is that when high flow goes through this Coat and Beck, then these ponds fill up, and as they fill up, that's kind of reducing the amount of flow that's capable of passing through during the very peak of the storm. And the whole concept of natural flood management is that you've got a place downstream that has a certain capacity to hold water before it spills out. And the idea is, can you try and keep the river from spilling over? And you do that by storing water in places to reduce how much what's called pass forward flow, how much flow is going further downstream. So I thought that would be a good example to talk about as our first example. And on thinking about the kind of legislation that Josh was talking about before, and the idea of addressing multiple benefits with solutions, there's opportunities with that type of feature in natural flood management and with what we're showing now to try and deal with more than just one aspect of the kind of ongoing. When you think about climate and temperatures rising, carbon emissions, and the idea of the need to sequester carbon and have a lower embodied carbon within our flood schemes and other things. But there's also the fact that with using nature, we can incorporate more and better natural systems to improve biodiversity and have room for pollinators and other things. So this next case study is all about, I suppose, some of the more local things we can see and implement in an urban setting, from green roofs, green walls, rain gardens, and just general green planting throughout urban areas. The environmental benefits of these sorts of interventions are reasonably obvious to all of us, I imagine, in terms of improving air quality locally, taking out harmful pollutants from the air. You need to have quite a lot of green to be able to do that to any real effect. But one area of really good evidence is around reducing urban temperatures, so urban heat island effect, and the potential of strategically situated trees in urban areas, reducing the air conditioning kind of costs and of managing temperatures in buildings, which of course, as well as having the nice effect of providing some nature and cooling naturally, it also reduces the amount of energy that these buildings use and the amount of carbon they get through in a given year. There's benefits to noise reduction and the habitat provided through the fact that these green spaces have been implemented. There's some kind of words of caution around this. So Josh, I think on the next slide, or just things to consider. that unlike a scheme, a natural flood management scheme where you're trying to manage, say, flood risk downstream in a measurable way, benefits are more skewed towards social and economic benefits of that particular case. But one thing to say in terms of managing a building's runoff, for example, that is something that that these sorts of interventions can do. Rain gardens and green walls could significantly reduce the need of a building to need or require further sustainable drainage within its footprint, which is really handy when in urban areas, particularly in the UK where we have limited space for things. And there's a really great example from Washington DC where buildings, a stormwater credit system was introduced. That was basically where buildings had to prove that they were managing for a certain rainfall return period, were managing the amount of runoff that their urban space or footprint would generate. And if they didn't have the space, they could pay other developers where there was the space to install measures to manage flood risk. A really good example, and one of the few examples of actually being able to, in a way, offset flood risk through a credit system. Green walls and green roofs, because of their local benefits, are likely to be best suited as part of a wider nature-based solutions strategy to have any truly measurable impact on urban heat, on air quality, on carbon sequestration, that sort of thing. But like I say, from that kind of runoff example, they can provide local benefits. As well as the social, the visual impact, the way it makes you feel. Passing a green roof or a green wall, passing a green roof, you're not going to see it, are you? But passing a green wall, you're going to get the benefit of seeing that on your day. Maintenance is important because once you need specialist maintenance to actually keep these things alive, keep them from wasting away and drying out during drier parts of the year, and to make sure they're still functioning and trapping nutrients and water throughout the year. That does require specialist maintenance. But I was also thinking we've also got to be careful not to over maintain some of our green spaces. Thinking now just about parks and other things. How often do you see just completely stripped and mown grasslands going through our urban areas, and sometimes wouldn't it be nice to see a bit more scruffy nature in our urban areas? And for example, one example of that is the implementing no mow May, for example, preventing any mowing of your urban areas, so urban green areas, to allow for pollinators and other insects to thrive. Our third case study is a bit more on the kind of planning side, because I thought that'd be useful context. And one of the things we were considering was how do we kind of stress the importance of existing habitat and land cover in a system. So this is just a few screenshots. The two on the left are taken from a web service called restore.eco, and in this you can look at any part of I think they've actually done this globally, to look at things like baseline woody biomass, understanding what carbon stock there is in a landscape currently, and looking at what potential there is to increase that moving forward. And they also have tools on that restore.eco for baseline biodiversity, although the information is quite coarse. This other one on the right hand side, Nature Insight, is a similar thing for baseline carbon and baseline habitat. For Great Britain, it uses and for England, it uses Living England habitat data to understand the baseline information. But it also looks at potential mapping of nature-based solutions as well, like what you could be doing. And this sort of, what I'm trying to stress is these sorts of tools are really important when we're thinking about, well, where do we want to develop? Where is it that we want to? We know we need houses, we know we need commercial sites, we know we need this, that, and the other. We might need to expand parts of our transport network. So in doing that, we must evaluate what the baseline information is. And I know we do lots of surveying of information, but at an early project stage, we could start using spatial data sets like these to help us think, well, if there's an area already doing a lot for carbon sequestration or a lot for biodiversity, then these are the areas that we need to look after and protect and potentially improve. And there may be other areas of the landscape where there is great potential to introduce new measures of nature-based solutions to help, again, sequester carbon, provide habitat, that sort of thing. And then in between all that, there may be areas that there's a limited baseline and there's limited potential to improve. So in those areas, is that where we can focus our really urban development and leave some of these areas of nature to thrive. Yeah, I think I've just got a couple more slides left. So just a few words of caution. It's not necessarily a silver bullet, and confidence in nature-based solutions is lower than more traditional solutions, for sure. Although there is a growing evidence base on the health benefits brought through nature-based solutions from the Josh mentioned in his slides around the measured reduction in stress, in blood pressure. There are benefits to walking through certain pine forests, I think, where it improves disease-fighting cells within our body, and that's through exposures from 20 minutes to an hour of walking through pine forests, where it basically improves our resilience against disease. But that evidence base is limited, and that needs to improve. So it's hard. I appreciate for planning systems to put faith fully in nature-based solutions. There's also an awful lot of stakeholders that need to be incorporated into any nature-based solution scheme. If you're going to be doing it across a city scale, or you're going to be working with the peri-urban, a huge number of landowners and other people to be brought on board. And sometimes it's just easier to do in terms of a flood risk reduction, it's just easier to build the wall to raise the standard of protection. Whole life cost is much easier to quantify from a traditional sense as well, because we've got databases and years of knowledge of how long it takes to look after, or how we need to look after a flood wall, for example, compared to a whole series of nature-based solutions measures dotted through a river landscape. And some of these features may need to be replaced and improved over time. Yeah, I think I've just talked about the communication. Incorporating things early is I think from that last case study and from the perspective of how many landowners and stakeholders need to be engaged, is a really important thing for implementing nature-based solutions. Next slide. So yeah, nature-based solutions need to be considered in a wider context, and specifically what challenges are nature-based solutions addressing? Can it do multiple things simultaneously? Air quality, urban heat, flood risk, and so on. But importantly, what else needs to change before we jump to the idea of using nature-based solutions to try to sequester carbon, to try and improve biodiversity, and this, that, and the other? There are huge steps and strides needed to limit what we're emitting, what we're damaging, and so forth. The amount of pollutants that hit our waterways and other things. So yes, nature-based solutions can help improve these things, but we need to also make sure that we're not just using that as carte blanche to carry on behaving the way we always behave in the amount of energy we use and how we produce it. Buy-in is incredibly important, not only from the stakeholders, but also from the community. From using flood risk as another example, is that same example. The community wants to know they're going to be protected, and if you can't have the confidence in that you're going to do that, then in a way we're pulling the wool over people's eyes. Another thing I wanted to mention, I think at this stage, was that it's not always applicable to nature-based solutions in an urban context. I was talking to Josh before this webinar about a scheme in that we were planning once in Team Valley, where we're looking at a deculverting of a long section of watercourse, and having the idea of having an area of open watercourse where we'd let nature back in, and have a walkway along the side of it. And this walkway was quite far away from the rest of the public rights of way. It was going under a couple of bridges, and the idea was that, you know, if we left this area to be as natural as possible, then we'd allow this area to kind of basically get dark in the evening, because that's important for allowing habitat to thrive. But from a public safety perspective, and a sense of safety walking in those areas at night, that would be a huge area that would just completely disagree with one another. We need to make sure that people feel safe walking in urban areas. Some talks I've listened to recently about the increase of urban planting and putting more trees in an urban area can also have that feeling of a sense of wariness walking in places, which, you know, is an unintended consequence of wanting to do things right for the environment. And I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say on this slide. I wanted to kind of finish on an image from my recent holiday, where we were just stopping in this city near Amsterdam, in Holland, and because I'm a bit sad, I took this picture because I was thinking, oh, look at all the services that the street's providing in terms of its carbon sequestration. There's pollinators, there's places for birds, and improvements to air quality, all going on here in one place, and isn't it amazing? But as I was taking the photograph, I was sort of thinking, actually, I don't know if it's more important in this setting that how would I have felt if this, or I wouldn't have stopped to take a photograph, certainly. How would I have felt if this green wasn't there in this street, and how sort of simple it is that that has been incorporated. There's lots of planters. There's a few kind of formally planted trees in the actual fabric of the urban area, but then a lot of the other green is in planters in other kind of mechanisms to get it there. And I think, like, the idea that they filled this space with as much green as they could really made me feel calm and enjoyable to walk through this area. So that's where I wanted to finish. I think we'll just stop there and take some questions.
Thanks, Alex.